Call the meeting to order, Finance Committee meeting, December 7th, 2017, 9 a.m. Amanda, call the roll, please.
McTaggart?
Yes.
Alt?
Yes.
Bills?
Yes.
Curtis?
Yes.
Raymond?
Present. One absent. I have a motion to approve the agenda. So moved. Mr. Raymond. Mr. McTaggart. Questions on the agenda? Straightforward. None. All in favor say aye. 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 Opposed? Motion carries. Public comments. Seeing no public comments, go to Randy Schultz, Liability and General Insurance update.
I want to start by introducing, this is Greg Steffens. His agency and mine have merged. We're now part of a larger entity, and doesn't really have any effect on the county. We have access to more companies that way, and just so happens Greg has a background in municipalities. His agency, Compass, insures ETSB, so it works out pretty well. Anyway, you'll probably see him around some. I'm not going anywhere. The agency's not changing names or anything like that. We're just becoming part of a bigger operation to be able to have a little more leverage with the companies. Anyway, it's been a relatively quiet week or month. We have been talking about, well, for us, we have been talking loss control. We're still trying to gather some information and get organized with that. And Tim Drury, who was here last month, has been putting together some ideas, and I think we're going to be ready to start talking about that at next month's meeting. So, I don't expect any big revelations, but I do think it's worth the time to try to get organized around this and see if we can't at least control the slippage in workers' comp, or make sure we're getting all the bang for the buck that we can. Anyway. That's all, unless somebody's got anything for me.
Randy? All right. Thank you, guys. Thanks. Susie Warner, Group Insurance.
Yes, last month we held the benefits fair here for a day and a half, I should say. We had a good turnout. People came through, made some changes. It was the time if you wanted to add a dependent or come on the plan or make any changes like that. That was the time to do it. We did get all those processed for 12/1, and then I will be here on the 13th from 9 to noon to sit and answer any questions for the retirees that are on the Medicare Advantage plans, to come in and answer any questions they have. But other than that, things have been going great on our end, and if anyone has anything for me? No? I'm not.
All right. Thank you very much.
See you guys later.
On to department head reports. Cindy.
I really don't have anything. Everybody should have a copy of the draft of the year-end treasurer's report. That's really all I have.
Can I say something about Mindy's treasurer's report? If you look there, I had this note later on down the line. If you look there, the GIS fund is negative. It's overdrawn $31,579 at 11/30. That was planned, and it relates to the fact that we're still paying the $11,000 a month in the fee to pay GIS. That will flip back next year. It'll end up being minus, my estimate is minus 15,000 at the end of next year, but by the year after, it'll go in the black, and we'll start accumulating money in that, a positive balance in that account. The problem is we cannot end the year with an overdraft in the account. So what I'd like to do, and this is typical, if we don't do this ourselves, it will be an audit adjustment. The auditors will want us to just transfer enough, I would say $31,600 from the general fund. It's just a journal entry on 11/30 to the GIS fund to reverse 12/1, so that as of 11/30 we cannot end the year with an overdraft in any of our bank accounts. So it's all one bank account. The account's not overdrawn. There's $9.5 million in it, but that one fund is negative, so there's no money transferring anywhere. It's a journal entry in the cash accounts within those two funds. So if I could get a motion from someone here to make that transfer effective 11/30 and reverse 12/1, that'll keep us in, at least in one instance, good graces with the auditors.
I'll make the motion. Mr. Raymond makes the motion. Charlie. Motion to transfer 31.6 general fund to the GLS fund. Any questions on that? 24 hours, huh?
We audit as of 11/30, not 12/1. Thank you.
Amanda, call the roll, please.
McTaggart?
Yes.
Alt?
Yes.
Jones?
Yes.
Curtis?
Yes.
Raymond?
Yes.
Anderson?
Yes. Lisa.
I don't have anything for finance, Carl.
Eric.
As we sat here, I finally got a grant agreement for 2017 EMPG. That grant year has already ended, and I am just waiting on that grant agreement. So that is signed, and Anita, I just forwarded it to you.
Okay, thank you.
I am has had some contact with me about the EOC technology grant. They had to ask some questions of me to cross our T's and dot their I's. So we're moving forward on that, but I don't have a grant agreement on that yet. I imagine it'll be coming late this month or early next month. And that's all I have for finance.
Okay. Sir. Bob?
Just where review's finishing up, taking the fight to the 20th of December. Just a note on that bill I talked about last month. The Senate did not take action on it. It died for any action. So obviously the veto session has ended. So we'll wait to fight that fight again next year. So, but short-term good news.
Cheryl, anything from public health? Chairman, anything? Anita? Anything that's not covered on the agenda?
I'm trying to think, everything else, nope, can be talked about elsewhere.
All right. We're now with the FY18 audit.
The internal control review is just starting. I received all the worksheets from the auditors last week that it outlines all of our different cycles, maybe AP, maybe cash receipts, maybe taxes, maybe all sorts, any type of function. Payroll is a function. And it's multi-pages long, and essentially there's a risk listed, and then I have to explain how we mitigate that risk using segregation of duties or whatever else it happens to be. Bob, I worked with Bob and Mindy quite a bit on this, for Bob in the tax cycle and the assessment cycle, Mindy in all the cash cycles. So we're working on that. They will be here to audit those. So what they will do is they're going to be here the week of that's the wrong month, 18th through the 22nd, and they'll take those surveys, those worksheets that we completed, and they'll pull tests throughout the year, transactions, and make sure all those checkpoints are in there. Every claim is signed, and the committee chairman signed it, etc. So they'll go through that process looking for any discrepancies there. They'll also do the circuit clerk audit at that time as well, which is required by law to have a separate audit. So they'll be doing that field work that week as well. And then they'll be here January, the week of the 15th through the 19th, full-time, full staff for field work, and then depending on how that first week goes, several days the next week as well. So that's what we're working on. Oh, I did start on the public health grant report that has to be done. There are agreed upon procedures. It's not a full audit, but it goes for, DHS requires it for the grants through them. The only one that's applicable this year is the WIC grant, so it's a smaller subsection, but it's a little funky a little harder for me to get to the right numbers because it's a state year, 7/1/2016 through 6/30/2017. But I'm hoping to have all that done by next week so that they can audit that while they're here early during preliminary anyway, and we can keep it out of the full audit time. So, working on that, and that's kind of where we're at.
Okay. Keep going. Review of financial policy.
Okay, I emailed those to all of you where we're at preliminarily, maybe a month ago. I didn't make hard copies. It was a month ago, just before, and I'm just wondering, what I'd like to do is keep this on here, and then I'm not going to do a whole lot with those drafts between now and February because of the audit. But if you can look at those, I'll be sending them to the department heads. They've received, or the applicable departments have received the grant section, which is the largest section. But if the committee could start looking through those, on a Saturday night when you have nothing else to do, and try to start familiarizing yourself with those, that would be great. I don't want to have to go through every policy and read it. But if we can kind of get some consensus that it's on the right line and says what we want, or might need to be added to other things the committee wants to be addressed, that would be great. So that item will just be on here moving forward until we get those done sometime. They do have to be approved, at least the grant policies have to be approved in FY18 in order to comply with the new uniform grant guidance that comes from the federal government. So by the end of our fiscal 18 year, it's got to be, so we have to do something, at least on that grant subsection next year.
A little bit, trying to read up on that a little bit if you could. Historic cash trend for various entities.
And you have that sheet in front of you. Really, the general fund is just so consistent. You can look, and I do want to caution you, these will not be the final numbers. We just did a motion to move $32,000 or so from the general fund to the GIS fund. So the front page will drop by 32 grand just for that entity. There could also be audit adjustment, or as I might make some year-end adjustments if I'm looking between now and field work time. It could change a little bit, but these are typically pretty close to the numbers. Second page, the public health trend, you can see that there. That's pretty consistent with last year, a little up, but that's kind of where that's at. The months of operating cash is in there. GFOA, which is the largest professional organization of governmental finance officers, of which I'm a member, recommends 3 to 6 months in reserves at all times. Now, this isn't reserves per se, it's really operating cash, but it is kind of a guideline, and that's why I put that there, so you can kind of tell where we're at. Let's see, next, ETSB, you'll see that there was a big drop in ETSB cash this month. They paid $90,000 the second half of that software that they bought a year ago. They finally paid that this month, so that's why you see their cash drop this month from $384 to $306, but they still ended 50 grand higher than last year. Joint dispatch, in terms of cash, look at that big spike. I'm not sure what happened in prior years related to the dispatch contracts that the checks used to go to the ETSB, and I think they maybe held the checks until December. I'm not sure. This is the first year that Amanda, the county board office, actually mailed out those dispatch contracts for 2018. And as those checks came in, we deposited them immediately, obviously following good internal control processes. What will happen is you're not going to see it in revenue. That will be one of my year-end adjustments, is to move all that revenue out to a prepaid, because it's not earned in 17, it's earned in 18. But the cash, look at that big cash spike, which you can see in prior years happened in December. So that's why I suspect either one, people are paying quicker, or two, perhaps the checks were held somewhere else and then not deposited till December. Not sure, but we deposited 163 grand, and we've seen really a good response in terms of those contracts being paid. So,
Have you gotten any outright negative response to it?
and then the last one, highway, you can see that extremely consistent, very, very consistent. And then on the back side, motor fuel tax. Now the issue is here, they received some funding for projects and they didn't complete them in the year. So you're going to see, and we saw that in their budget for this year. If you look at your R&E report and you go to Fund 625, their actual expense in the year was $966,000. The budget was $2 million, which means that there were projects anticipated to be done this year that did not. So the offset is, what it results in, higher cash than anticipated at the end of the year, lower expenses than anticipated.
Cash slab, state pays for.
That was the last one, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
So the other thing I did want to touch on in this section, Russell just asked a question prior to the meeting started about sales tax. Historically, if you look again at the revenue and expense report, the very first page, that's the big report that I pass out every month. Account number 40200 has historically always said sales tax. And we can go back to Mindy's report here. And then there was always some confusion of why the sales tax number here was so much lower than what was in the sales tax account. And we'd explain multiple times, because what's in this account is sales, use, and supplemental. So what I did this month is just change the name of that account to sales/use/supplemental tax, so that hopefully we all get on the bandwagon and understand what we're looking at and take away some of the confusion. Okay, Russell?
Well, yeah,
No.
I understand what you're doing there, which is great, but I still, again, if everybody looks at the committee's report, okay, the second thing on the private tax is sales. And we're looking at November 8th, receiving from the state of Illinois, which is roughly $13,000 in that particular one. $13,000. Now, that's a 0.25% of all general merchandise, including motor vehicles and everything else that's sold in Iroquois County. That's taxable. 0.25%. Then we go down to this so-called public safety tax on the very bottom of our list, and it shows $34,016. Now that's 0.25% of general merchandise.
No, it doesn't say merchandise. It says sales. That's the difference.
So that's 0.25% of,
Add sales and use. Add sales and use together on Mindy's sheet. 13,000 plus 22,000. $37,000. Whatever. 36, 50, whatever.
so there's 0.25% of use
Right.
showing up there.
The way the ordinance reads, it's sales. It doesn't say merchandise sales. It doesn't say merchandise. So let's say an out-of-state person buys product here, like Michigan. They pay use tax, they don't pay sales tax. So the public safety, so it's not in the sales tax line, it's in the use tax line. The public safety tax applies to all sales. So now that 0.25% for use tax is added to the public safety tax. The trend for the public safety tax will follow sales plus use,
And supplemental's not in there though?
not supplemental.
So in this case, we had roughly 13, 22, so about $35,000. Okay. Now we're still looking at that 34,000.
Right.
Now, one big ticket in sales tax that is not collected in public safety is what they call a 556 fine with the Illinois Department of Motor Vehicles. That is a big ticket. The average vehicle today is sell for $30-some thousand. Do the math on that 0.25%. That is not included in public safety, but it is in regular sales tax. I can't see how those two numbers are so close to each other.
Would you like me to call the State of Illinois Department of Revenue and ask for detail on the public safety tax?
Well,
I'll see what I can get.
Yeah, maybe so, because it doesn't make really sense that a 0.25% that we're looking at, all of a sudden we got another 0.25% coming in, but that 0.25% is greater, even though it does not encompass all the same stuff.
It's close to the same stuff. All right.
I just was wanting it to kind of make sense to me, and it don't make sense. And I'm sure the Department of Revenue can maybe shine some light on it.
We'll look forward to that as soon as she gets it. Probably next month. I wouldn't bet on getting anything anytime quicker than that.
No,
No.
we neither.
Or maybe February, when she's done with, we'll get it straightened out. Anything else on that end of it, as far as cash trends and...
Anyone have questions?
Okay. Take a look at your claims sheet and the claim, obviously take a look at some claims too, because we got
Larry, son?
I don't think I need to, but
No, you want Larry?
probably should. Or have it, put it there.
I have 2 additional claims that are not on the claims list. I should have said something when Randy was here. Yesterday afternoon, Randy Schultz brought the initial 25% billing for the insurance. This includes the workers' comp and then all our liability policies, which includes, auto, property, liability, inland marine, crime, employee benefits, all the policies. There are $70,000 worth of billings here, and I did put on your desk the trend of every policy. Since I've gotten here, I've been tracking those expenses, and you can see that I validated that the billings are correct, that the amounts on the policies that I received yesterday afternoon total what this original bid was that we went over and approved in September. So it matches the bid from Schultz Insurance, the premiums match, they're covered. I put on here the amount we have budgeted versus the amount of the premium in liability, all the liability, property liability. The total of the premiums for the full year will be $146,531. We had $160,000 budgeted. For workers' comp, the total will be $130,123. The budget's $140,000. So in both cases, we're adequately budgeted. And so I'd like to have those two claims approved as well.
All the rest of these are on the sheet, aren't they?
Yeah, except for the zoning and the ones Anita just gave you.
Here we go. FFA vouchers taken care of. For that recycling of the...
I move we pay all the claims.
Do you want to do a separate motion for the two not on the list, or do you want to include that specifically in your
Yeah, I should...
motion?
Specific,
Okay.
but it's not on the list.
Second item, so we have a motion for to pay the claims, including these two that will spell out, again, that Anita just told you about, including the zoning ones. Is there a second, or did I get a second?
I'll second.
And any seconds. Any questions on any of the claims? Russell?
Did we, get the liability with the local FFA chapter for the volunteer and labor force at the electronics recycling event a couple months ago?
Did we get the lot?
Yeah, who's gonna make a donation to them or something?
What's in the book?
Oh, is it on?
No.
Wouldn't it?
The claim that you see here is
that-
just for the recycling vendor.
Oh,
They charge us 25 cents a pound for any
something.
CRTs or TVs, etc. I do want to note, I talked to Larry about this, there's an additional charge on here with IMH for $221.50. Larry and I talked about this. We probably need to be more clear in the future. They charged us for that. They wanted to spell it out separately because when I talked to the owner or the contact here, he said this is supposed to be a residential event, that they charge more for businesses, and IMH brought a big load. So in future years, Larry and I talked, we probably got to spell that out separately, that it needs to
And
be
he said he
residential.
had talked with them before they brought that, and was gonna set up a separate time to come pick it up, and they brought it anyhow. And T&D brought some also, and the high school brought some also. That won't happen again.
Right. So that was $221 that just happened that day, so.
Any other questions on the claims? Seeing none, Amanda, call the roll, please.
McTaggart?
Yes.
Paul?
Yes.
Bills?
Yes.
Curtis?
Yes.
Raymond?
Yes.
Anderson?
Yes. Any old business for the finance committee today? As far as the, you want to hit on what we were talking about just a second ago, as far as it wasn't in the claim, so
It was not
coming in the future.
Did you have a,
Last month's meeting, you postponed, it was supposed to be on the agenda for this month to approve a donation. It was supposed to be on the agenda.
what was you looking for, $150 or something?
150 would be great, they'd be tickled with that, wouldn't they?
Kick it.
Yeah, I'll move that we fund the local FFA chapter that helped the electronic recycling event, supplied the labor, saved Larry's back, and $150.
What fund?
That would come out of that
The recycling fund.
recycling fund, tipping fee money. Keep those electronic items out of the ditch. And not do it for erosion control.
Okay, we have a motion to donate $150 for the FFA for their volunteer efforts. Now they're not volunteer, they're being paid. All right, second by Charlie. Any questions about that? It's a good thing that the whole idea, the whole process is good. If not, call the roll on that one also.
McTaggart?
Yes.
Alt?
Yes.
Bills?
Yes.
Curtis?
Yes.
Raymond?
Yes.
Anderson?
No. Any new business? Saying none? Entertain a motion to adjourn. So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed?
Donna,
Motion carries.
chapter.
They're gonna